James and Emma were, in everyone's eyes, the perfect couple. They met in college, both studying for promising careers. He in engineering and she in medicine. Their love blossomed quickly, and it didn't take long before they decided to get married. The house they built in Cedarville was a symbol of a successful and happy life, complete with a well-maintained garden and a white picket fence. To their neighbors and friends, James and Emma had everything anyone could wish for. Emma was a devoted woman, both to her career and her marriage. She worked as a pediatrician at the local hospital and was known for her empathy and skill with children. James, on the other hand, was a respected civil engineer, frequently traveling for work to oversee major projects. The constant travel was something Emma accepted with patience, always believing in the promises that it was all for building a better future for them and for the baby they were expecting. However, there was a shadow in James's seemingly idyllic life. He had a secret he had been carrying for months: an affair with Emma's best friend Esther. Esther and Emma had been inseparable since childhood. They shared confidences, laughter, and dreams, but Esther always had a spark of envy towards Emma's perfect relationship with James. Esther was an attractive woman, free-spirited, and often impulsive. She lived each day to the fullest, frequently crossing boundaries that Emma would never consider. This difference between the two friends was what initially attracted James to Esther. What started as innocent flirting quickly turned into secret meetings and eventually into a relationship they both knew was forbidden. James and Esther met in furtive moments, often in the house he shared with Emma, taking advantage of Emma's work hours to indulge in their clandestine passion. The duality of his life began to weigh on James, who, although in love with Esther, still held affection and respect for Emma. But that respect was wearing thin with each passing day. Emma's routine was meticulously planned. She woke up early, prepared breakfast for James, and went to the hospital. Always concerned about the health and well-being of the baby, she avoided any kind of stress, fully trusting James to take care of everything at home while she was away. It was a trust he betrayed without hesitation. James and Esther planned their meetings with surgical precision, secretly exchanged messages, calls disguised as work business, and discreet hotel meetings became the norm for them. The thrill of the forbidden and the fear of being discovered only fueled their passion further. At home, James maintained the facade of a loving and attentive husband. He still made affectionate gestures toward Emma, bought flowers, and prepared romantic dinners. For him, it was a way to soothe his own guilt, a desperate attempt to balance the duplicity of his life. Emma, innocent and loving, believed that their marriage was stronger than ever, especially with the approaching arrival of their baby. Esther, on the other hand, did not share the same guilt as James. For her, the clandestine relationship was an exciting adventure, a way to finally have something she had always envied in Emma, James. She justified her actions with the belief that if James was willing to cheat, then perhaps he would never be completely happy with Emma. However, this web of lies and betrayals was about to come crashing down. The secret they both kept was becoming unsustainable. Esther began pressuring James to make a decision. She wanted more than just to be the other woman. She wanted the relationship to be out in the open, without subterfuge. James, in turn, was torn. He knew that revealing the truth could destroy not only his marriage but also the friendship between Emma and Esther, and that weighed on his conscience. The atmosphere in Cedarville began to change with the arrival of autumn. The leaves on the trees turned golden and red, and the air became cooler. It was a change Emma always loved, appreciating the beauty of the transforming seasons. But that season, she began to feel an unease she couldn't explain. There was something in the air, a subtle tension that disturbed her inner peace. Emma could not imagine that this unease was a premonition of what was to come. She continued with her routine, blindly trusting James and maintaining her friendship with Esther, completely unaware of the betrayal unfolding under her own roof. However, the truth has a way of revealing itself, and fate was preparing a scenario that would change their lives forever. As James and Esther met for the umpteenth time, whispering promises and sharing moments of passion, Emma was busy with her responsibilities at the hospital. The day when the truth would come to light was approaching, And what started as a secret romance was about to turn into a scandal that would shake everyone involved. James's love for Emma and his passion for Esther were on a precarious balance, and he knew he couldn't continue this way for much longer. The dilemma consumed him, but the attraction to Esther was too strong to ignore. He was trapped in a web of his own making, and every move he made only ensnared him more deeply. And so, on a day that began like any other, fate was preparing its final blow. The illusion of a perfect life was about to be shattered, revealing secrets no one could have anticipated. The story of James, Emma, and Esther was only beginning to unfold, and the consequences of their actions would be felt by all in Cedarville. The sun was high when Emma left the hospital that afternoon. It had been a particularly exhausting day, and all she wanted was to go home and relax. Her body, now starting to feel the weight of her advanced pregnancy, craved rest. Yet, a feeling of unease accompanied her, a sensation she couldn't quite define. On her way home, she stopped at a local bakery to buy some sweets. She thought of surprising James with his favorites. He always loved the chocolate cakes from there. With the package in hand and a smile on her face, Emma headed home, eager to see her husband and perhaps enjoy a peaceful evening together. Meanwhile, at the house she shared with James, the atmosphere was quite different. The air was heavy with tension and desire. James and Esther were together again, taking advantage of the time they had before Emma returned from work. They were in the sauna, a refuge where the intense heat combined with the passion they shared. "You need to make a decision, James," Esther whispered, as their proximity increased the temperature not only of the sauna but also of their bodies. "We can't keep going on like this forever." James sighed, guilt and pleasure constantly battling within him. "I know, Esther. No. But it's complicated. Emma, she's pregnant. I can't just abandon her now." Esther looked into his eyes, her expression stern. "And what about me? What am I to you then? A pastime?" Before James could respond, the sound of a car parking in the garage echoed through the house. He froze. It was Emma. His heart raced, not with desire but with panic. They had to act quickly. Emma entered through the front door, placing the sweets on the kitchen table. "James, I'm home," she called, expecting to hear her husband's familiar response. When Emma didn't get a reply, she walked through the house, calling for her husband. When she reached the sauna area, something in the unusual silence alerted her. The door was slightly ajar, and she could hear muffled whispers. Emma's heart raced. Slowly, she pushed the door open, and what she saw made her stop, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. There were James and Esther, caught in an intimate and forbidden moment. Shock coursed through Emma like an electric shock. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her husband, the man who had promised to love and protect her, was betraying her with her best friend. "James." Her voice came out as a broken whisper, almost inaudible, but laden with a pain that cut like sharp blades. James and Esther quickly separated, panic etched on their faces. "Emma, I can explain," James began, but he knew there was no explanation that could undo the damage done. Emma's eyes were filled with tears, but her gaze was steely. "Explain what, James? How could you do this?" "With my best friend." Esther, trying to compose herself, stepped forward. "Emma, I'm so sorry. We don't speak," Emma screamed, her voice echoing through the room. "You both betrayed me. You destroyed everything." The pain and betrayal were almost unbearable. Emma felt a wave of nausea and had to brace herself against the wall to avoid falling. She looked at James, hoping to see remorse or at least shame, but all she saw was the reflection of her own devastation. James tried to approach, but Emma recoiled, raising her hand. "Don't come near me. I don't want to hear anything more from you." Emma turned to leave the sauna, trying to process the flood of emotions. But before she could take another step, James and Esther exchanged a knowing glance. In a desperate and swift action, James grabbed Emma and pushed her back into the sauna. Esther, with a look of panic, locked the door behind her. Emma, stunned by the sudden violence, pounded on the door with her fists, shouting for help. "James, Esther, What are you doing? Let me out. Emma, I'm sorry, James said through the door, his voice trembling. We had no choice. You can't do this. I'm pregnant. James, please. Emma pleaded, but her cries fell on deaf ears. Desperate to cover up their affair and escape the consequences, James and Esther quickly gathered what they could and fled the house. Inside the sauna, the heat became unbearable. Emma tried to stay calm, but the lack of air and the intense heat made her increasingly weak. Her vision started to blur, and she felt like she was about to faint. Hours passed until Emma's sister, Lisa, arrived for a surprise visit. She entered the house, noticing the strange silence. Emma! James! She called out but received no reply. As Lisa approached the sauna area, she heard Emma's faint moans. Hurrying, she opened the door and found Emma unconscious on the floor. Panic overwhelmed Lisa, who immediately called for an ambulance. Emma was rushed to the hospital, where she was admitted in critical condition. The doctors worked tirelessly to stabilize her and ensure the safety of the baby. During the days Emma remained unconscious, Lisa stayed by her side. Amidst the distress, a new face appeared at the hospital. Michael, a doctor with a calming and reassuring presence, was assigned to care for Emma. From the first moment, he felt an inexplicable connection with her. Michael spent long hours by Emma's side, caring for her with dedication and affection. As Emma fought for her life, Michael found himself increasingly drawn to her strength and resilience, even while she was unconscious. He knew there was something special about her, something that touched him deeply. Thus, in the following days, as Emma was recovering, Michael fell in love with her. The promise of a new beginning began to emerge, even amidst the darkness of betrayal and suffering. Emma didn't yet know it, but her life was about to take a new direction, guided by a genuine and unexpected love. While Emma remained locked in the sauna, James and Esther moved quickly. With racing hearts and trembling hands, they gathered essential belongings, money, and some documents. The adrenaline and fear of being caught drove their actions. They knew they had to escape, and fast. "Grab what you can quickly," James whispered, panic evident in his voice. Esther, with tears in her eyes, tried to stay calm. "Where are we going, James?" "Anywhere far from here. We need to hide until everything settles down," he replied, hastily closing his suitcase. They exited through the back door, trying to avoid being seen by the neighbors. With heavy hearts and guilt hanging over them, they got into the car and drove away. As the house disappeared in the rearview mirror, the reality of their actions began to sink in. They had left Emma, pregnant and defenseless, locked in the sauna. Part of them hoped she wouldn't survive the ordeal, thereby eliminating any witness to their betrayal. "Do you think she'll be able to get out?" Esther asked, her voice choked with fear and guilt. James shook his head, trying to push away the image of Emma trapped. "I don't know, Esther. All I know is that we need to leave now." They drove for hours, stopping at a cheap motel in a distant city. As they tried to sleep, remorse and fear kept them awake. With every sound outside, they imagined the police were coming after them. It was a long night full of nightmares. The next morning, while having breakfast at a small diner, the television on the wall caught their attention. The local news was covering a breaking story. A pregnant woman had been found unconscious in a sauna and was in a coma at the local hospital. James and Esther looked at each other, their blood running cold. The reporter continued. "Police are investigating the circumstances that led to the woman, identified as Emma Thompson, being found in critical condition. She was rescued by a family member and rushed to the hospital, where she remains in a coma. Investigators are still unclear about what happened but suspect foul play." The silence in the diner was palpable. James felt the world crumble around him. They had failed. Emma was alive, and now the authorities were involved. "James, what are we going to do?" Esther asked, her voice trembling. James rubbed his face, trying to think. "We need to stay off the radar. We'll keep moving until we figure out what to do. We can't go back now." As James and Esther continued their desperate flight, Emma remained in the hospital, fighting for her life. The doctors did their best to stabilize her and ensure the safety of the baby. Michael, the doctor who dedicated himself to caring for her, couldn't help but be drawn to the strength and resilience Emma displayed, even while unconscious. Lisa, Emma's sister, stayed constantly by her side, holding her hand and talking to her in the hope that her voice could reach through the darkness surrounding Emma. "Emma, please wake up. We're here for you. You need to fight for yourself and the baby." The days dragged on, and the news of Emma's condition spread throughout the city. Everyone speculated about what could have happened in that seemingly happy home. The police continued their investigation, searching for answers that seemed increasingly elusive. Meanwhile, in their new reality, James and Esther lived with the weight of guilt and the constant fear of being discovered. They moved frequently, never staying long in one place. The tension between them grew, fueled by uncertainty and regret. "We can't keep going on like this forever, James," Esther said one day, while packing up for yet another move. "We need a plan." James sighed, looking out the window of their motel room. "I know, but I don't know what to do. We're trapped, Esther. Trapped by our own actions." As Emma struggled to regain consciousness, a new chapter was beginning to unfold in her life. Michael, who spent more and more time by her side, felt a growing connection. He couldn't explain it, but something about Emma touched him deeply. One night, while checking her vital signs, he held her hand and whispered, "Emma, I know we don't know each other, but I'm here for you. I'll take care of you and your baby. Please fight. Come back to us." In the following days, small signs of recovery began to appear. Hope blossomed among those who loved Emma, while the fate of James and Esther seemed increasingly uncertain. The story was far from resolved, but amidst the chaos and darkness, the promise of a new beginning began to emerge. Emma was about to discover that, even in the most difficult circumstances, love and hope could blossom in unexpected ways. The days in the hospital continued to drag on, and Emma's life remained precariously hanging by a thread. Michael, with his constant and caring presence, had become a familiar figure for Lisa and the few friends who came to visit Emma. He was always by Emma's bedside, monitoring her condition and silently hoping for her to open her eyes. Meanwhile, James and Esther were growing increasingly nervous and paranoid. The news of Emma surviving the ordeal they had orchestrated terrified them. In their flight, they lived in a constant state of alert, always looking over their shoulders, fearing that the police were about to catch up with them. "James, we need a plan. We can't live like this forever," Esther frequently repeated, her voice filled with desperation. "I know, Esther. I know," James would reply, but his words provided no comfort. They were trapped in a situation of their own making, with no apparent way out. In the hospital, Emma began showing signs of recovery. Small movements of her hands, slight tremors in her eyelids, gave hope to everyone around her. Michael, observing these signs, felt a quiet joy growing inside him. He spent hours by her side, speaking softly, holding her hand, and hoping she could hear his voice. "Emma, I'm here. You're safe now. Please fight. Come back to us," he murmured, his voice laden with emotion. Then, one morning that seemed like any other, something extraordinary happened. Emma's eyes slowly opened, adjusting to the soft light of the hospital room. At first, everything seemed confusing and hazy, but soon the figure of Michael by her side began to take shape. "Hi, Emma," he said with a warm smile, his eyes shining with relief and joy. "Welcome back." Emma blinked, trying to process where she was and what had happened. Her memory began to return in painful fragments: the betrayal by James, the sauna, the suffocating heat, and then nothing. Who are you?" she asked, her voice weak and hoarse. "I'm Michael. I'm your doctor," he replied, gently holding her hand. "You're in the hospital. You've been through a lot, but you're safe now." Tears filled Emma's eyes as she tried to take it all in. "And the baby? Is my baby okay?" Michael nodded, squeezing her hand more firmly. "Yes, the baby is fine. You were very strong, Emma. Now you just need to rest and recover." As Emma slowly regained her strength, Michael remained by her side, offering support and comfort. Lisa was also there, her relief and joy visible. Each passing day saw Emma regaining her energy, along with the determination to move forward. James and Esther, on the other hand, continued living in a self-imposed nightmare. The news that Emma was recovering and that the investigation was progressing rapidly left them increasingly desperate. "We need to disappear completely, James. Go somewhere no one can find us," Esther suggested, her voice filled with panic. James, though exhausted and tormented by guilt, knew she was right. "We'll find a way, Esther. I promise we'll figure something out." Back in the hospital, Emma's recovery progressed well. Michael's constant presence by her side was a tremendous comfort. He was not just her doctor. He had become a friend, a confidant, and silently something more. The connection between them grew with each passing day, fueled by Michael's kindness and dedication. One afternoon, while Michael adjusted Emma's pillows, she looked into his eyes and said, "Michael, you saved my life. I don't know how I'll ever thank you for everything you've done for me." He smiled, his heart warmed by her words. "You don't need to thank me, Emma. I'm just happy you're doing well. And as for your baby, we'll make sure you're in full health to welcome them." Emma felt a wave of gratitude and something deeper. Michael's presence brought a sense of safety and hope she thought she had lost forever. Days turned into weeks, and Emma was finally discharged from the hospital. Lisa took her home, helping her adjust to a new life, a life without James. But now, with Michael's presence, there was a new perspective, a new hope. James and Esther, on the other hand, were at a breaking point. Paranoia consumed them, and the reality of their crimes became unbearable. They knew time was running out, and sooner or later, they would be forced to face the consequences of their actions. For Emma, recovery was slow but steady. With Michael by her side, she felt she could overcome any obstacle. He had become a constant figure in her life, helping her rebuild not only her health but also her confidence and hope for the future. As night fell and silence enveloped the city, Emma looked at the starry sky through her window, feeling stronger and more determined than ever. She knew that with Michael by her side and the support of her sister, she could face any challenge. James and Esther's betrayal was a deep scar, but it did not define her future. Love and hope had found a new path for her, and Emma was ready to embrace it with all her strength. The following months were a time of transformation for Emma. The constant support from Michael, her sister Lisa's love, and the inner strength she rediscovered helped her rebuild her life. Emma gave birth to a beautiful baby boy, who became the light of her days and a symbol of her resilience and courage. Michael was by her side throughout the process, not only as her doctor but also as a devoted and loving partner. Their relationship blossomed naturally, and the affection they felt for each other grew into a deep and sincere love. With his patience and kindness, Michael showed Emma that it was possible to trust and love again. James and Esther, in their desperate flight, made a mistake. At a gas station, they were recognized by a vigilant police officer who immediately contacted the authorities. Within hours, they were captured and taken back to face justice. The trial was swift, and both were convicted of their actions. Justice was served, bringing a sense of closure to Emma. Meanwhile, Emma and Michael decided to start a new life together. They moved to a small town where no one knew their story and began anew. The house was modest but filled with love and hope. Michael proposed to Emma on a sunny afternoon at the park where they used to stroll with their son. Emma accepted with tears of joy, knowing she had found a partner who loved and respected her. The wedding ceremony was small and intimate, with only close friends and family. Lisa was the maid of honor, proud to see her sister find happiness again. Emma, dressed in white, radiated serene happiness, while Michael couldn't take his eyes off her. Over time, Emma was able to leave the shadows of the past behind. The emotional scars were still there, but they were now accompanied by happy memories and the promise of a bright future. She devoted herself to being the best mother possible to her son and building a life full of love with Michael. On a quiet afternoon, as they played in the yard, Michael hugged Emma from behind, kissing her neck softly. "We're happy, Emma. We managed to get through everything. Emma smiled, holding his hand. Yes, we did. And now we have everything we need. The sun set on the horizon, casting a golden glow over the house and garden. For Emma, each day was a new beginning, a fresh chance to live fully and love without fear. She knew that with Michael and their son by her side, the future would be bright and full of possibilities. Surrounded by the love of her new family, Emma finally found the peace and happiness she so richly deserved. The past was now a distant memory, while the present and future shone with promises of love, hope, and new beginnings.